At the moment, technology is the only way we can interact with our team members and our customers. It is an absolutely essential business tool, but it is also more than just a business tool. It's a way in which we can engage with our team members on a personal level. So celebrate achievements and milestones virtually. That means birthdays, anniversaries, both personal anniversaries and work anniversaries. Do all of those fun things virtually. Arrange purely social get-togethers online where work is not discussed, and make it clear that this is a social gathering, guys. We're not talking about work today. We're just chatting to each other. Also be very careful though of intruding on your employees' personal time. So if you have those informal virtual get-togethers, don't do them after hours when your employees have after-hour family obligations and maybe they just want to rest and put their feet up and watch Netflix. Allow room for spontaneity as well. So give your team members access to the virtual tools that you as a company can provide to them and let them use them spontaneously to arrange a quick catch up with colleagues if they want to, or perhaps to arrange a quick catch up with somebody outside the organization that doesn't necessarily have anything specific to do with your business. You also need to have a very clear communication strategy. Have an appropriate number of formal reporting meetings. These might be weekly, but fortnightly might be better in your organization. Try not to have those formal reporting meetings every day, because if you do, again, you might see it as just checking in and checking that your staff member is coping. They might see it as you intruding and you spying on them and not trusting them to do the work that they have been assigned to do. Also remember that online meetings aren't necessarily the most effective means of communication. Sometimes a quick phone call is a lot better. Don't always feel compelled to arrange a Zoom meeting or a GoToWebinar, or whatever the case might be. Some communications are also appropriate to deliver in a whole team context. When you get the team together, you might brainstorm an idea, you might discuss a specific project that involves multiple team members. Others are better confined to individual employees. So think about the way in which you communicate and communicate in relevant and appropriate ways, which is no different from what it would be in an office environment where you might call one staff member into your office or you might call the team together. Also set clear time management guidelines for meetings. It's very, very important that when you are doing a lot of things virtually, you're doing things via video conferencing, Zoom, etc., that you set the ground rules before the meeting happens. That way, everybody knows this is a 15-minute catch-up. Everyone in this call has 30 seconds to quickly state where they're at with a particular project. Or this is going to be a 3-hour brainstorming session. Clear your diaries, make sure that you have all the tools available in that 3-hour period, and this is what we are going to discuss, and this is the way we are going to do it. Less experienced employees will probably need some guidance around task management if they haven't worked from home before. You will help them to distinguish between those urgent tasks, the must-have tasks, and the do when you can tasks. They may not have the ability to make that decision on their own. As a result, they're going to try to multitask at too high a level, and you'll probably find that urgent things are going to fall through the cracks. It is vital that in this time you provide support to your team. And that means you need to provide a safe virtual workplace. You need to ensure that your team members are not bullied by others. You need to make sure that there isn't too much impact on their personal time. Do not expect your staff members to start working at 7 a.m. They wouldn't do that in an office. So don't expect them to do it just because they're at home, and don't expect them to work until 10 o'clock at night. Also find out what it is that your employees need to achieve their goals. Provide support for them to achieve those goals rather than checking up on their progress, and be genuinely interested in their welfare. And this means their mental, their social, and their physical welfare. If people are chained to a desk because they have so many back-to-back Zoom meetings in a day, they have an email inbox that is absolutely flooded, they are not going to get up and move around, and that is not healthy. Make sure that your employees still take breaks, that they have tea breaks, that they take time out away from their office to have lunch, that they go for walks, etc. And show your team that they're valued. Small gestures go a long way. So you might, from time to time, have a delivery to your staff members. Send them a voucher that they can use to download a movie, or send them a small gift. Something tiny is enormously appreciated by people because it shows that you were thinking of them. And remember, don't neglect plain old happiness and fun. People are isolated now. They need to be able to just have a laugh from time to time. You need to encourage that as an employer. In the last couple of slides for today's presentation, I want to focus on something a little bit more serious, and that is security. When it comes to working from home, there are certain things that as a business owner or manager, you have to have in place, because in addition to having a duty of care to your staff, you have a duty of care to your business. So have very clear policies on dealing with company records, confidential information, data, etc. This extends to your staff members making phone calls in communal spaces like the living room or the kitchen. It extends to online meetings with family members present and so forth. You need to make it clear to your staff that when they are conducting business, they need to do it in a space that is in some way more private than just the home. And that particularly applies to having those confidential phone calls. They need to go into a space where they can close a door. They can't have people walking in and out who might be privy to confidential information that they have no right to be. This applies particularly if you have partners in the same home who might be working for different and competing organizations. Instruct your employees on how to deal with the physical records that they keep and how they need to dispose of any documents that they've printed out. So if you have a policy of not printing out anything in an office environment, then they cannot print anything in their home environment. If, however, you allow people to print documents because it's easier to edit, for example, from paper than it is from a screen, that is acceptable, but then you need to tell them how to dispose of those documents. They can't just put them in the rubbish. They might have to have a shredder, and you might need to provide that for them to do. Or you might need to arrange collection, secure collection of documents to be disposed of securely. And you might need to do that with all your employees on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, depending on how much paper is generated. Ensure that your employees have adequate, up-to-date cybersecurity information and guidelines. It's up to you to make your employees aware of any phishing attacks that are happening, any other hacking sort of attacks that could occur. It's not up to them to find that information. You need to find it, and you need to provide them with the tools and the guidelines to manage that. And very importantly, understand your rights and obligations regarding the privacy of your employees. And finally, let's think about BYOD, yet another one of those new acronyms. Bring your own device. Remember that any personal devices that are brought into a business network pose a threat to the security of that business. You need to have a clear policy regarding the use of personal, non-company issued devices. So if you are not giving your staff members laptops and you expect them to use their own, understand that that laptop could present a problem for your organization from a cybersecurity risk perspective if it is accessing company networks and company records. You need to have policies about how that device needs to be managed and which device can be used. Implement two-factor authentication for accessing any company records, any licensed software, etc., and have protocols in place to deal with any loss that you might sustain. Implement VPNs to restrict downloads of data. In an office environment, you wouldn't necessarily let every single employee access every single part of your network. The same applies to when they work from home. And make sure that you encrypt any data that is transmitted on the move. Establish boundaries for the use of devices, and those are not just personal devices, but business devices, and access and the rights of inspection to that device. So if you are allowing your employees to BYOD, then you need also to have the right to have that device inspected to make sure that it doesn't contain viruses and that it doesn't contain any company information that you do not want publicly available. And that brings us to the end of this session. We've trotted through a lot of information in a relatively short space of time, but we will open it up now to questions. And Lisa, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. So, thank you, Collins. So a couple of questions coming up. You mentioned legal obligations. Now, where do I go to get that information?
Right, that's a bit of a thorny one because it's going to be different for every jurisdiction. Every country has its own workplace laws, it has its own human resources, rules and regulations and so forth. So you will need to go to the authority that governs workplaces in your country. It could be the Small Business Ombudsman, it could be the workplace ministerial environment, etc. So find out who governs workplace law in your country or in your city, because it can vary from city to city as well, and that's where you're going to go for the information. I would also suggest that a business, particularly a reasonable sized business, obviously really small businesses can't necessarily afford legal advice on this. They are depending on what is out in the public domain. But if you can get some legal advice, you probably won't need to spend more than an hour or two with a legal expert, and particularly an HR legal expert, and ask for the information. It will save you a lot of money in the long run.
Thank you. So another question. I'm really concerned about my company's data falling into the wrong hands. Can I install a camera to watch my employees working from home?
You'd actually be surprised at how many businesses think that way. And the short answer is no, you can't. In a workplace environment, many businesses do have cameras that actually watch their employees. And that is not illegal because it is a different environment. It is an environment where, as an employee, you enter your employer's environment and they control what occurs in that environment. They can have access to your emails, for example. They can read them all. They can do whatever they want because that is considered to be their property. However, in an employee's own environment, no, you cannot install cameras to spy on your employees, partly because you cannot guarantee that all you are looking at is their work-related activity. If they're in a home environment, you could be accidentally spying on other people in that home. So apart from the fact that it's immoral and it's unethical and you really should be trusting your people, it's also illegal. So no, don't do it.
Yes. I don't think anyone at GTPA would like it if I did that, that's for sure.
Oh, and you wouldn't want to be watching us anyway. Nothing to see.
How do I get my team to socialize virtually without it seeming to be too forced or too intrusive?
And that's an interesting question, and it's actually a really good question. It needs to happen organically. So I would suggest that the only way you stop it looking as if you're kind of forcing people into the socializing situation is to make it obvious to them that the tools are available. So team, as you know, we get together on Zoom regularly and do business things. Here is a separate Zoom account, which is purely for you to use